Everybody, welcome back to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel. Today we're talking about power forwards. Yesterday we broke down the centers, put them into tiers, all the guys that are on the free agent market that your team could target. Make sure you check out that video from yesterday. Today we're talking about the power forwards. We're going to break it all down, but first make sure you are subscribed right here to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel and turn on notifications. That way you know every time we put out a new video, particularly heading in to the free agency period, the draft, all the trades we think it's going to be the summer of the trade. So make sure you stay in the know and turn on notifications. Keith, a lot of power forwards to talk about, and I'm excited to dive into this group. It's always interesting when we're looking at the four in the modern NBA because there's so many teams that use the power forward position very, very differently. We see some threes that really jump up to be fours. We see some teams go a little bit bigger with a more traditional player. I can't wait to get into this.
Yeah, if I kind of really wanted to do this the way I tend to think about it, I would have done it as bigs, wings, and ball
Yeah.
handlers because that's really how the game is starting to slot. But so many people still think of it in the traditional positions of 1 through 5 and those kind of things. So it's fine to break it down this way too, and we'll add the qualifiers in there as we get into some of these names of guys who play the 5 a lot. So there's a couple of them that could probably play at the 3 a little bit more, and then we'll have this. Guys generally tend to move up a position versus down a position. So we'll have a couple guys in the small forward group, and basically, guys, how we derived at these is you pull the play time types and the lineup stats and get a sense of, all right, this is where this guy plays the most of his minutes, knowing there might be some time spent at another position with this. But yeah, and then for the tiers, if you're new, if you didn't watch the center video, we'll explain the tiers again. How NBA front offices generally slot players is into tiers. They do this at the draft when it's all about projections at the draft. And then when players are established in the league, they slot them into a tier. And there's projecting, of course, in there as well, as you'll see as we get into probably the first name on our list here. But the tiers are all-stars. That's your guys who are all-stars, starter, they're high-end starters. They're potentially all NBA guys down the line. But you can think of the tier as all stars. And every once in a while, you have somebody who's like, they're an all star, but they're really like a superstar, like Kawhi Leonard, right? When he comes up under the small forwards, you can look at it that way. Then the next is starters. These are guys who either are starters or they play starter equivalent minutes. We want to be very clear about that
Generic
part.
term.
Yeah, some of these guys they come off the bench and that's going to be their role, but they play starter equivalent minutes or play a starter equivalent type role. They may only play 25 minutes a night, but it's a high impact role. And then rotation players, those are guys that are good players. They're going to be in your 9-10 man rotation. Some of them towards the bottom, probably drop out when you get towards the playoffs. And then the last group is fringe. And those guys, if you're looking at the list, they're in alphabetical order by last name. There was some confusion on the center video on
It's
this.
not a ranking.
And the reason why is we don't rank them at that point because those guys they're all basically the same. You can kind of come or go with them. They don't really make all that big of a difference with them. It's really kind of personal preference in this. These rankings, to be clear, so Trevor doesn't catch any flack. These are my rankings. He will tell me where he disagrees on here. But if you're just looking at the picture and you want to yell at me, yell at who put together rankings, that's fine to put that on me. So all the qualifiers are out there now. Let's go ahead and get started with the top guy on the list, John Collins. Restricted free agent from the Hawks. I put him in the all-star tier because I think with the right team, with the right opportunity, John Collins can be an all-star because we've seen him put up near all-star numbers. This year his numbers are down, but that was mostly because the Hawks' talent was way, way up.
And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with John Collins. He's clearly the top guy out there. Like, it's not even close on this list. It's John Collins and then everybody else. And for a while, we were hearing, well, maybe the Hawks will look to move on from him. Maybe he was even on the trade block somewhere around the trade deadline. Maybe that'll happen. But now, given the success that the Hawks had in the playoffs, making it to the Eastern Conference Finals, I think that changes the outlook to where now it's almost a lock that they're going to match and they're going to bring him back because they had so much success with him in there. Whereas before, things were looking a little bit frayed to where teams were kind of, the vultures were circling. Like, can we pry this guy away? I don't think that's going to happen anymore.
Yeah, I think the only way is if a team comes in and they give him a max offer sheet with all the bells and whistles. So the full trade bonus, they give him the player option on the 4th year. They give him the upfront payments. That doesn't change the cap hits, but he would actually get paid his large chunk of his salary early. And those kind of things. So those are things that teams can do to try to scare a team off matching. But even then, I think the Hawks might still match, and then I think the Hawks will take an approach of we'll sort all this out later. Yeah, we'll have Collins, we'll have Trae Young on a new contract here pretty soon, a year from now, and then we'll have all these other guys, and you know what? But we're gonna figure it all out later because we don't want to break this team up yet. If we have to move on from guys, they were smart about the way they structured the Gallinari contract. Bogdanovic's contract is very tradable. You could, if you had to, move on from Herter or Hunter or Reddish or any of those guys, and you could do that. So yeah, I'm with you. I think John Collins, more likely than not, sticks right in Atlanta on a really big contract, and that's the way that one goes, which takes, unfortunately, the far and away, as you said,
Yeah.
best power forward kind of off the table. And the next guys, 4 veterans and then a young guy. So probably Trevor and I remember the movie 3 Men and a Baby. So this is
Yes.
4 vets and a baby here. But the vets, Blake Griffin, PJ Tucker, Paul Millsap, and then the kid is Lauri Markkanen. The vets, it's really personal preference at that point. Who do you like best out of Griffin, Tucker, and Millsap? Those are guys you could also argue maybe are more 5s now at this point in their career than they are 4s. But PJ Tucker, I think, firmly a 4. He's been playing a lot of the 3 for the Bucks throughout this playoff run. So yeah, I think those guys are there. I think Blake, if you had asked me pre-buyout where Blake would have been if he was a free agent on this list, I would have said maybe the lower end of the rotation guys. But he was that good with Brooklyn. He
Yeah.
looked great. Like he's got plenty left if he's in a supporting role. I think Tucker still is a pretty good player at his age, and then Paul Millsap. I think he's probably more of a give him a chunkier MLE 7-8 million and let him kind of be your backup 4 or 5 on a pretty good team. And you're in pretty good shape. And then Markkanen, like Collins, restricted free agent, but it hasn't shown nearly as much as Collins has, and that really starts to become what do you project him to be? He's right on that borderline of being starter versus rotation player. I left him in starter because that's kind of where he's been so far, but that's going to take a lot of projecting if you're going to give him any kind of meaningful money this offseason.
Yeah, when you look at this list, you look at these guys here. This is why we say it's going to be the summer of the trade, right? I mean, you look
Yeah.
at all of these options. Is there none of these guys like they're good play, and we've got them as starters, so they're good players. But it's not
Sure.
like you sign any of these guys and you say, "There it is, 35 minutes a night, locked down. We're good from here." No, I mean, look, you've got
Yeah.
guys in Blake Griffin, PG Tucker, Paul Millsap, right? You're not wanting to play these veterans that many minutes. Blake Griffin, yes, he looked
No.
much better
Yeah.
with the Nets, but he's not ready to go jump over a Kia again or anything like that. So these are guys that you can certainly sign and they can certainly help out your roster. But this is not like John Collins where you just have your long-term answer here at the position. So again, when you're looking at the free agent market, these guys are going to get paid. But if for a team that really needs, hey, we need a locked in starter for this spot, it's not really here. And so that's where we're going to
Yeah.
see, I think, more trade activity. But again, that said, I think all of these guys have merit on their own and can be intriguing additions, particularly to with the veteran players to contending teams. These are the kind of guys that maybe wind up
Yeah.
taking a little bit less in order to play for a contender, which is historically what we see, and can give a nice boost to a team that's ready to win a championship.
Yeah, a lot of really good vets in this power forward grouping. As we get into the rotation players, Bobby Portis, who had a nice year with the Bucks, but then really has had some nice moments in the playoffs, especially as without Giannis at the end of that Hawks series, he did quite well. So I've got him at the top of that grouping. Doug McDermott next.
Yeah.
If you want a shooting four, you can't do any better than
No.
Doug McDermott. Maybe in the entire league. That's he in Doug McDermott's a guy you could give $7 million a year to, like the contract he's coming off of for the next 3 years, and feel perfectly fine with that because he's going to deliver you $7 million of value as a shooter for the next few years. Rudy Gay, very much a veteran, can still score. Still, had his moments with the Spurs this past year. Spurs probably moving in a slightly different direction this upcoming season, so he might be someone who's available for a contender. JaMychal Green, a lot like Paul Millsap there in Denver. Probably, my guess is one of them is back with Denver on a fairly cheap contract. We'll see. Jeff Green, is he off the minimum? That's kind of the question with Jeff
He
Green.
played
If
well.
he's back with the Bucks, yeah, and if back with the Bucks, if he's back with the Nets, the answer is probably not. And I think if you're Jeff Green, you're probably prioritizing where's my best chance to win
Yeah.
at this point in my career. Same with Carmelo Anthony. We know he seems pretty happy in Portland, but if Portland starts to go in a different direction, Anthony's a guy I think contenders could look at as, all right, this guy can give us 10, 15 points a night off the bench as a scorer. And then you get into the guys who are kind of more similar-ish type of value. I think Anthony's almost a cutoff point within this grouping. Maybe you could have moved Markieff Morris up a little bit, but I don't think he looked as good with the Lakers this time around as he did in the title run.
No, he had a stretch.
So
Just
yeah,
to throw in here a little bit about him, he had a stretch. As I recall, he was like 1 for 28 from three, and it might have even been a little bit worse than that during a stretch of games. Yeah, he was not as good this season as he was last year, particularly in the playoffs
yeah.
last year. So that was an issue here.
Yeah, it's weird too how he has aged so differently from his
Yes.
brother, right? Because Marcus Morrison is dead-eye shooter that looks great, but
When they came into
yeah,
the
just
league, though, like it was always, Markieff was more of the four and Marcus was more of a
yeah,
three, and now they can both kind of
three,
float a little
yeah,
bit. Where Markieff now, though,
a
is
little
more of
bit
a
more,
4 or 5 than anything else, and
yeah.
Marcus more four still. But it is interesting that
It,
Marcus
it
Morris looks like he's got a little more pop to him.
Yeah, Markieff, I wouldn't be surprised if he's just back with the Lakers on another minimum, or what the Lakers could do here. This is where you'll see these teams that are over the cap.
Yeah.
This was I like to call this the Patrick Patterson approach. You give them the bump using the non-bird rights bump over their minimum salary, which takes them off of the minimum exception, but it makes their salary a little bit more. So if you wanted to do a trade,
Yeah.
You have a little bit more to add in there. And that could be something if you're the Lakers, because at that point it's really just kind of money. So you're not overly concerned. It's not keeping you from getting somebody else. Jared Vanderbilt's a guy I kind of like for the Timberwolves. He has had interesting moments. He plays with a lot of energy. He's a pretty good rebounder. Doesn't do a whole heck of a lot else there. George Niang is a guy I think probably just sticks with the Jazz. He's found a home there as a backup. He's kind of a 3-4, but probably more of a 4. Trey Lyles, Mike Scott, again, a couple veterans who can do some stuff. Trey Lyles probably can't go to the Raptors after missing that shot that kept the Canadians out of the Olympics. So
Yeah.
that probably is off the table there. But then we'll see with Nicolo Melli and those guys. Melli might reports are coming out of Europe. He might be headed back over to Italy. So we'll see. I've always liked Rondé Hollis Jefferson. And then the last guy I just want to mention, because he played really well for the Orlando Magic at the end of the season, a guy I know you're familiar with, Mo Wagner. Did some stuff, and when you're always looking for shooting bigs who can stretch the floor. Wagner's probably got a little bit of a future in the league because he can do that. And the same for Luke Cornett. I think will probably get another chance with another team because he can do some stuff. But it gets pretty thin after you get past Carmelo Anthony probably.
Yeah, Mo Wagner, we knew him as Madman Mo because he's got just this intensity that he plays with every single
Yeah.
possession. He's that kind of rough and tumble guy that's going to crash to the floor after a loose ball when there's 30 seconds left in a blowout game in the fourth quarter. It doesn't matter to him. So he's that guy, and that's the kind of guy that can catch on with teams. And again, that's why he fits perfectly in the rotation category, where he's not a guy that you're going to lock into your starting lineup, but to put on your bench and toss
Yeah.
him in there, he can do just fine there. Keith, when I'm looking at this list too, thinking if there's a price gap, if there's a big drop off between some of the guys that are in the starting tier and a few of the players here that are in the rotation tier, like I could see a team talking themselves into, well, you know what? Okay, we can't really get to Blake Griffin's price range, but is Jeff Green that bad of an alternative, right? Can we just
Sure.
go and get somebody
Yeah.
like that? Or even, I think that Doug McDermott is going to get some money with the premium that is on shooting. So I do think there are some kind of
Yeah.
diamonds in the rough here in this rotation tier that are going to generate some interest. But again, nobody that's going to like completely change the makeup of a team or anything.
Yeah, I agree. These are guys who are outside of probably the top, maybe 6, 7 guys, maybe down to McDermott. They're probably guys who you're more looking for 10 to 15 minutes a night. Down to McDermott, you're looking for 25 minutes a night. In the case of Collins, clearly you're looking for 35 minutes plus a night out of him. But yeah, that's the one that's interesting. I want to go back to a guy real quick because I want to get what your read is on. What do you think Lauri Markkanen? What happens there with him?
I don't know. I mean, look, the Bulls are in a situation where they can play to win right now, right? That's what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
They want to keep Zach LaVine around long term. They've got to show him, hey, look, we're ready to win. Made that big trade to get Vucevic. Um, I don't know if Markkanen is the fit that they need, right? So,
I hear
but
you.
at this point, what's his value? Like, if you were going to trade Markkanen, you probably should have done it already. But here they are. Do they really want to try to keep him around if he gets a decent offer as a restricted free agent? I don't know. I think he's a guy that you could probably pry him loose with a strong enough offer. But how many teams feel comfortable enough with him to provide that offer? I
Yeah.
really don't know what his future holds. It's an interesting, it feels like if he didn't have the restricted tag, it feels like he's the kind of guy that could get like a 1 year decent size kind of prove it contract and then would come out and really show what he's got in this next season because I just don't feel like we've seen what he can do yet.
Yeah, when you look at a guy who is 24 years old, he should probably not be behind 3 guys
Right.
in anybody's rankings. And again, maybe you have Markkanen higher than I do if you're watching out there. But he should not be behind 3 veterans who are closer to the end of their career than they are to the beginning. This guy, he should be, in theory, his profile tells us he should be right behind John Collins. His production and his lack of ability to stay on the floor puts him down, much lower on the list. And I think, yeah, the reason why I asked you is because I don't have a real good feel for it either.
Yeah.
I've even heard suggestions that if the Bulls can get to a point where they move off Satoransky or Thaddeus Young, that they could just non-tender him the qualifying offer and renounce him and just go cap space, which they can get to a good chunk of cap space
Yeah.
to really say, all right, it's LaVine, Vucevic, and then a couple other guys, and we're going to build that way. People love throwing out the Lonzo Ball for Markkanen double
I've
sign and
seen those.
trade. I don't think the Pelicans would do that. I think the Bulls would probably be all over it. I think Alonzo would make a lot of sense for the Bulls, but I don't think the Pelicans would do that. I mean, in theory, again, Markkanen, yeah, it makes some sense next to Zion, a big who can stretch the floor and all those kind of things. But you're talking, you're going to have to invest 17 million a year roughly in him if you're sending Lonzo the other way. That's not. I wouldn't do that. That's too much for me. So yeah, I think he's going to be somebody I'm going to be very interested in his landing spot, what he gets paid, and does he have that kind of second draft potential where it's go somewhere else, get a fresh start, and really does he get built up from there?
And to be clear, look, if he shot well from three last season, there's going to be interest in him. The question is just what degree. It hasn't lived up what we thought he might be coming out of the draft. And I do think you make a good point there with the qualifying offer. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. Let's talk about it real quick. Once a team issues the qualifying offer, if the player hasn't signed it yet, they can take that away. They can like just because the
Yeah.
team issued it and made the player restricted doesn't mean they can't go away and then free up some cap space. If you remember years ago, the Lakers
Yeah.
did that with Julius Randle when he asked for them to do that so that he could hit free agency. And the Lakers then took the cap space they got from it. They signed Rajon Rondo. So that's an option for teams. It doesn't come up very often, but that is something that happens. And yes, I know you're laughing because they signed Rondo with them. We all knew at the time. Look, at least we could say
We know.
playoff Rondo showed up long enough for the Lakers to win a championship. We'll take this.
What
So
you
we'll
needed
take
him
it.
to do.
They needed him at that point, but yes, big picture, letting go of Julius Randle to keep
Yeah.
Rajon Rondo around was not a smart move. But Again,
Well, at
championships
least it
also.
wasn't freeing up cap space to sign Timofey Mozgov and
Oh
Luol
God.
Deng at 12:01 Eastern. Yeah, and that's the thing. And there's a limited window where you can do that unilaterally as the team. I believe it's 3 or 4 days. I'd have to double check that to make sure where you can pull it. Boston did that with Kelly Olynyk the summer that they signed Al Horford. I believe it was Al Horford. That's how they created the space. But yeah, and a lot of times it's advantageous for the player because then, restricted free agents, unless you're a top tier restricted guy that like a John
Yeah,
Collins that a team's throwing a near max at, teams aren't really going to chase those restricted guys because it just ties you up for a couple days while the other team decides to match or not. So yeah, to play spoiler too, it starts to get a little bit better as we get into the wing,
yes,
the wings. So there's small forward, shooting guards, and then the point guard group, who we'll probably wrap with, is pretty deep and has a lot of talent at the top. But again, look at the two last videos we've done, center and power forward, and you're going to get a real sense of why Trevor and I keep hammering. If you want to make real improvements this year, it's going to have to be via trade because there's just not those impact free agents, and these guys are not the kind of guys you're going to sign and trade for and hard cap yourself if you're a top tier contender and you've limited cap flexibility. You're just fairly limited. You're going to be pushing to go get those stars via trade.
absolutely. Yeah, and that's going to be the challenge this offseason for a lot of teams. And we're going to see, I believe, some wheeling and dealing. The exciting part, Keith, I thought about this earlier today. Like, the NBA finals are starting tonight. So things are going to go not necessarily quiet, but things definitely don't heat up until after the NBA finals.
Yeah.
The discussions are happening right now. Like all the different trade rumors, all the little info that's going to leak out in the next like week or so, all those discussions are taking place right now. It's all just getting set up for what's going to be a really exciting offseason. And like I said, we're expecting a number of trades to go down. Before we wrap this up, is there anybody?
But I want to hit one
Yeah,
thing on that if I can
yeah,
to that. Everybody was together at the draft combine. All 30 teams, people were there this year, which is different than it was last year. Now we're seeing these big group workouts where one team is hosting, 7, 8,
right.
9, 10 really good players, and then teams are coming in to join in on those. So some of those, I think we've seen upwards of 20 plus teams are coming in together. So we're in a really cool place where you've got people are together again in these conversations. When you're sitting around watching the 15th time a guy's done the shuttle cone
Right.
drill, you're really kind of saying, all right, hey, let's talk about something else here. And in these conversations, they start. You would be surprised how often they just start with, hey, what are you guys looking at doing with player X this off season? And then that's where it goes. From there, we move on, and sometimes they grow into something, and sometimes they don't grow into anything. But trades don't happen in 5 minutes. The groundwork is being laid today, and that's why you're going to start getting some of those reports, as Trevor mentioned, of hey, teams are talking about this and that and those kind of things.
Exciting time. As we're wrapping up here, anybody of note at the bottom of the list here as far as the fringe players? I mean, Kostas Antetokounmpo, word is he's going back to Greece, so
Yeah,
he's not even there. Jared Dudley, right? You got to have Jared Dudley on your team if you if you want to
yeah.
have a shot. He's the locker room chemistry guy. Other than that, I mean, there's not a lot to get excited about here, I guess I should say.
No, I think Jakar Sampson has had moments the
Mhm.
last couple years. DJ Wilson, I was hoping he'd really kind of take advantage of that opportunity to play more when he was with the Rockets, but we didn't really see that. Jordan Bell is somebody that still probably carries a little bit of interest. He's only 26, so maybe we could see something there. But yeah, it's just not. These guys are not going to jump out. Some of these guys will still be around for sure, and they're going to be on teams. But you're talking somewhere fringe guys or guys 12th to 15th man on your standard contract, or your two-way guys, and that's what some of these guys are going to lock into. And like Kostas Antetokounmpo, there's a couple guys who have already signed overseas, James Nunnally and Cam Reynolds. Why Nicole O'Malley as well. Some of these guys can make way more money going overseas, and doing it. It's a little bit of a different lifestyle over there too. You only generally play twice a week at most. Now the practices are a lot more serious because you're practicing 4 or 5 days a week, sometimes double practices in a day. So it throws you back to the high school days for
2 days.
there. But yeah, it's different, right? So yeah, exactly, 2 days. So yeah, and then you mentioned, yeah, I mean Jared Dudley. I hope Jared Dudley plays forever. That's a BC guy, man. I want as many BC guys in the league for as long as we can have them.
Well, Jared Dudley has said that the Lakers need him back, and he wants to be back, and he's going to be knocking on Rob Pelinka's door. We'll see if he can
Doesn't
get
surprise
that
me.
done. Yeah, he's an amazing guy. All right, everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let us know your thoughts on the power forward market. Obviously, not a ton of huge names out there, but again, we're going to inch our way towards some of the bigger guys on the market when we talk about the small forwards, the shooting guards, and then, of course, the point guards. But give us your thoughts on the power forward market in the comment section down below. And again, don't forget, subscribe right here to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel. Make sure you like this video as well. Till next time, stay safe and see you.